Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars when everything changed. The communication system suddenly came alive with sounds and voices from every human settlement in the galaxy. His officer, Lisa Parker, turned around from her desk with wide eyes as the message played through every speaker on the ship. The voice that spoke was cold and mechanical, like a machine trying to sound alive. It spoke in perfect English first, then repeated the same words in 16 other human languages. Jake listened carefully as the alien voice delivered its message to all of humanity. "Attention, species called human," the voice said without any feeling. "You have been watched and studied by the Galactic Silence Council. Your species makes too much noise. Your loud communications and music broadcasts disturb the peace of space. You must stop all sound transmissions beyond your home planet immediately. You have exactly 72 hours to comply with this order. If you do not obey, we will take action to make you silent." The message ended, and the bridge became very quiet. Jake looked at his crew and saw fear in their faces. Lisa Parker was the first to speak. "Captain, they want us to stop talking to other human colonies. They want us to stop broadcasting our music and messages." Jake nodded slowly. He had heard stories about the aliens who called themselves the Vorthak Empire. These creatures believed that noise was evil and silence was the only way to have peace in the galaxy. They had been the rulers of this part of space for thousands of years. Their own species communicated through very quiet sounds that humans could barely hear. They thought any species that made loud sounds was dangerous and primitive. Dr. Kevin Barnes, the ship's expert on alien life, quickly pulled up information about the Vorthak on his computer. "Captain, our intelligence reports say they have forced 12 other alien species to become silent over the past 1,000 years. Some species agreed to be quiet willingly. Others had to be forced." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, who handled all communications for the ship, looked up from her station with worry. "Sir, I'm getting the same message from every human colony and space station. They all received the same 72-hour deadline. Earth Command is calling for an emergency meeting." Jake walked closer to the main window and stared out at the endless space filled with stars. Somewhere out there were the Vorthak ships, watching and waiting. He knew that humanity was facing an impossible choice. They could give up their voices and their music to stay safe, or they could refuse and face whatever punishment the aliens would bring. The captain thought about what it would mean for humans to become silent. No more singing, no more laughing, loudly. No more calling out to friends across a room. No more radio broadcasts between colonies. No more music concerts. No more children playing loudly in the parks. The idea made him feel sick inside. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "what are we going to do?" Jake turned away from the window to face his crew. These were good people who had followed him across the galaxy, exploring new worlds and helping to build human colonies among the stars. They trusted him to make the right decisions. But this choice was bigger than anything one ship captain could decide. "We wait for orders from Earth Command," Jake said finally. "But I want everyone to understand something. The Vorthak think that being loud makes us dangerous. Maybe they're right about that, but not in the way they think." Amy's communication board lit up again. "Captain, we're receiving emergency transmissions from human settlements all across this sector of space. Colony New Boston is asking what they should do. The mining station on Asteroid Belt 7 wants to know if they should shut down their work songs. The passenger ship Star Dancer is asking if they need to stop their entertainment programs." Dr. Barnes looked up from his research. "Captain, according to these files, the Vorthak have something they call correction protocols. When a species refuses to be quiet, they use special weapons that can damage the parts of the body used for making sound. They've done this before." Jake felt anger building inside him as he learned more about what the Vorthak had done to other species. The idea that anyone would try to take away something as basic as the human voice seemed wrong in every possible way. "Keep monitoring all communications," Jake ordered his crew. I want to know what every human settlement is doing and thinking, and prepare a full report on everything we know about Vorthak technology and military strength." As his crew went back to work, Jake remained standing by the window, looking out at the stars. In 72 hours, humanity would have to give an answer that would change their future forever. The aliens wanted silence, but Jake wondered if humans were even capable of being truly quiet. From the moment babies were born crying to the songs people sang while they worked, noise and sound were part of what made humans human. The countdown had begun, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the Vorthok were waiting to see what humanity would choose. Admiral Peter Hamilton called the emergency meeting just 6 hours after the Vorthak message reached every human colony in the galaxy. Representatives from Earth, Mars, the moon colonies, asteroid mining stations, deep space exploration ships, and distant farming worlds all connected through quantum communication links. The main conference room on Earth looked out at screens showing faces from across human space, all waiting to hear what their leaders would decide. Hamilton stood at the front of the room, his gray hair and serious expression showing the weight of responsibility he carried. Behind him, a large screen displayed a map of human territory, with red dots marking every colony and station that had received the alien ultimatum. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hamilton began, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of human space, "we are facing a decision that will define what kind of species we choose to be. The Vorthak Empire has given us 72 hours to become silent or face their correction protocols." Colonel Ryan Mitchell from the Mars Defense Force was the first to respond. His image appeared larger on the main screen as he spoke. "Admiral, we need to think about this carefully. The Vorthak have been the dominant power in this region for thousands of years. They have weapons and technology we don't fully understand. If we refuse their demands, they could destroy our colonies." Murmurs of agreement came from several other military representatives. Captain Susan Blake, commanding the colony ship New Horizon with 50,000 civilians aboard, nodded as she spoke. "Colonel Mitchell is right. We have families to protect, children who need to grow up safely. Maybe we can find ways to communicate quietly, like the Vorthak do." But Dr. Helen Carter, Earth's leading expert on human culture and psychology, stood up to address the gathering. She was a small woman with fierce eyes who had spent her career studying what made humans unique among all the species they had encountered. "What you're all missing," Dr. Carter said firmly, "is that sound and music aren't just tools we use to communicate. They are fundamental parts of human identity. Our mothers sing lullabies to help babies sleep. Our workers sing songs to coordinate. Dangerous jobs. Our lovers whisper sweet words, and our warriors shout battle cries. Take away our voices, and you take away our humanity." The room became quiet as people considered her words. Then Lieutenant Commander Ben Foster's voice came through from the Deep Space Exploration Fleet, far beyond the edge of mapped territory. "Dr. Carter is absolutely right. I've got crews out here who spend months in the darkness between stars. Every night they gather together and sing the old songs from Earth. It's the only thing that keeps them sane when they're so far from home." Captain Tony Rodriguez from the asteroid mining operations added his support. "Our miners work in some of the most dangerous conditions in human space. They use work songs to stay coordinated when they're operating heavy machinery in zero gravity. Without those songs, people will die in industrial accidents." The debate continued for hours, with representatives arguing on both sides. Some favored compliance to protect human lives. Others insisted that becoming silent would destroy what made humans human in the first place. As the discussion went on, more and more voices began to support resistance. Commander Gary Collins, representing the Outer Rim settlements, made a point that surprised everyone. "Has anyone considered that maybe the Vorthak are afraid of us? Think about it. They've been the dominant species here for millennia, ruling through fear and forced silence. Then humans show up, singing and laughing and making noise everywhere we go. Maybe they see us as a threat to their control." This idea sparked new discussions throughout the meeting. If the Vorthak were afraid of human noise, what did that say about the power of sound itself? Then a young communications officer named Julie Sanders, who had been quietly analyzing data during the entire meeting, asked for permission to speak. She was just 23 years old and had only been working with interstellar communications for 2 years, but something in her analysis had caught her attention. "Sirs and madams," Julie said nervously, "I've been studying the Vorthak transmission patterns, and I found something interesting. They do use sound for communication, but at frequencies so low that human ears can barely detect them. They're not asking us to be completely silent. They're asking us to communicate the way they do." The implications of this discovery spread through the meeting like electricity. The Vorthak weren't asking humans to stop communicating entirely. They were demanding that humans abandon their natural way of expression and adopt the Vorthak method. Instead, Dr. Carter stood again, her eyes bright with understanding. "Don't you see what this means? This isn't about reducing noise for the sake of peace. This is about cultural domination. They want us to become like them, to abandon everything that makes us uniquely human." Admiral Hamilton had been listening carefully to every speaker, weighing all the arguments and considering the consequences of each possible choice. Now he stood and looked around the room at the faces on the screens, knowing that his next words would determine humanity's path forward. "I've heard everyone's concerns," Hamilton said slowly. "Those who support compliance raise valid points about safety and survival. Those who support resistance raise equally valid points about human identity and freedom." He paused, looking directly into the main camera that would carry his image to every human settlement in the galaxy. "But there's one thing I keep coming back to. In all of human history, we have never willingly given up our voice. Not to kings, not to emperors, not to dictators, and not to aliens who think they know better than we do about how to live our lives." The room held its breath as Hamilton continued. "The Vorthak Empire has ruled this sector through fear and forced conformity for thousands of years. Maybe it's time someone showed them that there are other ways to live among the stars." He stood, straighter, his voice growing stronger. "Humanity doesn't whisper. Humanity roars. And if the Vorthak don't like that, then they're going to have to learn to live with the noise." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. By a margin of nearly 3-1, the representatives of human space chose resistance over compliance. They would not be silenced. The response came not from Earth's government buildings or military headquarters, but from ordinary people living and working throughout human space. Within hours of Admiral Hamilton's announcement, something unprecedented began happening across every human colony, station, and ship in the galaxy. On Titan Base, a mining platform orbiting Saturn, Foreman Gary Collins gathered his crew of 300 workers in the main assembly hall. These were tough people who spent their days operating massive drilling equipment in the dangerous environment of space. They had heard the Admiral's speech, and they understood what it meant. "Listen up, everyone," Gary announced over the communication system that reached every corner of the mining platform. "Those aliens want us to be quiet. They think human noise is dangerous. Well, I say we show them exactly how dangerous human noise can be." The miners, still wearing their heavy work suits and carrying their tools, began to sing. It started with one voice, then 2, then 10, then all 300 joining together in the old work songs that had helped humans coordinate dangerous jobs for generations. The sound echoed through the metal corridors of the station, growing louder and stronger with each verse. Meanwhile, aboard the passenger liner Stellar Dream, cruise director Monica Lewis was organizing what she called the Great Human Symphony. The ship carried 3,000 passengers traveling between Earth and the farming colonies of the Centauri system. These people had paid for a peaceful vacation cruise, but when they heard about humanity's choice to resist the Vorthak demands, they wanted to be part of the response. The ship's main deck, normally used for quiet dining and conversation, was transformed into a concert hall. Passengers brought instruments, children brought their voices, and even the elderly passengers, who could barely walk, came to add their support. They sang everything they could remember: classical operas, folk songs from Earth's many cultures, rock anthems, children's nursery rhymes, and popular songs from a dozen different human worlds. The sound was so powerful that it registered on the sensor equipment of nearby ships. Other vessels in the same space lane began receiving requests from their own passengers and crews to join the singing. Within hours, dozens of ships were broadcasting music and voices across the vacuum of space. But it was 10-year-old Emma Watson who created the moment that would be remembered throughout human history. She was traveling aboard the science vessel, Discovery, with her parents, who were xenobiologists studying alien plant life. Emma had been learning to play violin for 2 years, and despite her parents' concerns about attracting Vorthak attention, she convinced them to let her contribute to humanity's response. Standing in the ship's observation lounge, with the stars visible through the large windows behind her, Emma played a simple melody that every human child knew: "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Her playing was not perfect. She was still learning. But there was something pure and innocent about the sound that touched everyone who heard it. The ship's captain decided to broadcast Emma's performance, and within minutes it was being transmitted across human communication networks. The image of a young girl playing violin while looking out at the stars became a symbol of humanity's refusal to be silenced. Children on dozens of worlds heard Emma's recording and began playing the same tune on whatever instruments they had. Some used violins like Emma, others played piano or guitar or flute. Many just sang the words with their young voices. Soon there was a symphony of children's music stretching across light years of space, all playing the same simple song. The Vorthak response came quickly. Commander Zexthai, the alien empire's primary military enforcer, transmitted a cold warning to all human settlements. His ship, invisible to human sensors due to advanced stealth technology, had been monitoring the growing noise from human space. Humans continue their disruptive audio emissions despite clear warnings, Zexthai's mechanical voice announced. Correction protocols will commence in 24 hours. All noisy species will be silenced permanently. But humanity's answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Jake Morrison, still commanding the USS Defiance in deep space, made a decision that would change everything. He had been listening to the reports of singing miners, musical passengers, and children playing violin, and he realized that something historic was happening. Jake ordered his communications officer to open all broadcast channels at maximum power. He was going to send a message that every Vorthak ship in the sector would be forced to hear. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force," he announced, his voice carrying across space with unprecedented clarity. "You want to hear what humanity sounds like? Then listen to this." What followed was the largest coordinated broadcast in human history. Jake transmitted everything: Earth's greatest symphonies performed by famous orchestras, the laughter of children playing in parks, the cheers from sporting events where millions of people celebrated together, love songs sung by couples on their wedding days, work songs from miners and farmers and builders, and battle hymns that soldiers had sung while marching to defend their homes. The transmission was picked up and amplified by every human ship, station, and colony in the sector. Space communication officers who had never met each other coordinated their efforts to create a broadcast that could be heard across dozens of star systems. On Earth, the great concert halls opened their doors and invited everyone to come and sing. On Mars, the terraforming crews sang while they worked to make the red planet more suitable for human life. On the generation ships heading toward distant stars, families who had been traveling for decades added their voices to the galactic chorus. Even humans who had never considered themselves musical found ways to contribute. They clapped their hands, stomped their feet, whistled, hummed, or simply cheered as loudly as they could. The message was clear: humanity would not be silenced. Dr. Helen Carter, monitoring the global response from Earth's communication center, watched in amazement as the data streams showed human noise levels across the galaxy. "It's incredible," she told her assistants. "Every human settlement is participating. This isn't just defiance, it's a celebration of what makes us human." The broadcast continued for hours, with new voices and sounds joining every minute. Space itself seemed to ring with the sound of humanity refusing to surrender its voice. Commander Zexthai, aboard his stealth ship, struggled to maintain his composure as the human noise penetrated even his vessel's advanced sound-dampening systems. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand why his superiors considered these creatures so dangerous. The Vorthak correction protocols began with a surprise attack on the human settlement of New Harmony, a farming colony on the edge of human space. The alien ships moved through the darkness like silent ghosts, their advanced stealth technology making them invisible to human sensors until they were almost close enough to attack. New Harmony was home to 15,000 people who had left Earth to build a new life, growing food for the expanding human colonies. They had been listening to the galaxy-wide broadcast of human music and voices, and their spirits were high despite the approaching danger. When the Vorthak vessels finally appeared on their detection screens, Security Chief Carlos Martinez faced the most important decision of his life. Carlos was a former military officer who had come to New Harmony to escape the violence of his past and help build something peaceful. But as he watched the alien ships approaching his adopted home, he realized that sometimes peace had to be defended with strength. Instead of powering up the colony's defensive weapons or raising energy shields, Carlos made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. He activated every speaker, alarm, and communication device on the colony. Then he sent a message to every person in New Harmony. "Citizens, this is Chief Martinez. The aliens are here, and they want us to be quiet. I say we show them what human noise really sounds like." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Farmers left their fields to join the demonstration. Families came out of their homes carrying pots and pans to bang together. Children brought their school instruments. The colony's small orchestra set up speakers in the main square and began playing as loudly as possible. But it wasn't just noise for the sake of noise. The settlers sang work songs that helped them coordinate their farming operations. They played traditional music from the many Earth cultures represented in their community. They told jokes and stories and laughed together as loudly as they could. The Vorthak ships, equipped with sensitive audio detection systems designed to maintain their preferred silence, were overwhelmed by the cacophony. Commander Zexthai, leading the attack force, writhed in his command chair as the human noise penetrated his ship's defenses like a weapon. "Impossible," he hissed to his subordinates through their quiet harmonic communication. "How can they create such chaos? How can they function in the middle of such disorder?" Meanwhile, Admiral Peter Hamilton had been coordinating humanity's first real military resistance to the Vorthak Empire. Captain Jake Morrison's ship, the USS Defiance, led a small fleet of vessels in what became known as the Singing Fleet. As they approached the Vorthak force threatening New Harmony, every human ship began broadcasting music at maximum volume. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, Morrison's communications officer, had made a crucial discovery while analyzing Vorthak technology. The alien ships used harmonic resonance patterns for their stealth systems and defensive shields. Human music, with its complex rhythms and unpredictable melodies, disrupted these systems like feedback through a microphone. "Captain," Amy reported excitedly, "their stealth technology depends on maintaining perfect acoustic balance. Our music is creating interference patterns that their computers can't compensate for." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships charged through space broadcasting everything from classical symphonies to heavy metal music, their weapons firing in rhythm with the melodies. The USS Liberty, commanded by Captain Doug Stevens, coordinated its missile launches with Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, creating a deadly dance of music and warfare. The Vorthak ships, suddenly visible and vulnerable due to the acoustic interference, found themselves fighting an enemy that broke every rule of civilized combat. Human vessels sang while they fought, their crews cheering and shouting as they maneuvered through space battles. But the most decisive moment came when young Emma Watson, still aboard the science vessel Discovery with her parents, convinced them to let her contribute to the battle. This time, instead of the simple, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," she played a piece her grandmother had taught her, a wild, improvised melody that seemed to capture the essence of human creativity and unpredictability. The Discovery's captain, recognizing the potential of Emma's music, amplified her violin through the ship's main communication array. The sound created a resonance pattern that shattered the harmonic shields of Commander HFY's flagship. The massive Vorthak vessel, suddenly visible and defenseless, found itself surrounded by singing human ships. "Surrender," Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication channels, "or we'll play our loudest music until your ship falls apart." HFY, experiencing defeat for the first time in his long military career, was forced to order his fleet to retreat. As the Vorthak ships limped away from New Harmony, the human colonists below continued their celebration, their voices rising into the night sky in songs of victory. The news of humanity's success spread quickly throughout human space. Other colonies began organizing their own musical defenses. Mining stations taught their workers battle songs. Passenger ships turned their entertainment systems into weapons of sound. Dr. Helen Carter, analyzing the battle data from Earth, realized that humanity had discovered something revolutionary. "It's not just that our music disrupts their technology," she explained to Admiral Hamilton. "It's that they literally cannot understand how we can function in the middle of what they consider chaos. To them, our ability to coordinate complex activities while making noise seems impossible." The Vorthak Empire, which had dominated this region of space through fear and enforced silence for thousands of years, suddenly found itself facing an enemy that fought with joy, sang while working, and turned music into a weapon. But Commander HFY, nursing his wounded pride aboard his damaged flagship, was already reporting the defeat to his superiors. The Grand Silence Keeper Vorthamun, ultimate ruler of the Vorthak Empire, was not pleased with the news. "These noisemakers have corrupted the natural order," Vorthamun declared to his war council. "If we do not act decisively, their chaos will spread to other species and destroy the peace we have maintained for millennia." The order went out across the Vorthak Empire. Assemble the largest fleet in their history and prepare for the final. Quieting. They would not allow humanity's noise to survive, no matter what the cost. Captain Morrison, receiving intelligence reports about the massive Vorthak buildup, knew that the real war was just beginning. Humanity had won the first battle with music and determination, but the aliens were preparing to respond with overwhelming force. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether the galaxy would remain silent under Vorthak rule or learn to sing with humanity's voice. The victory at New Harmony was just the beginning of something much larger than anyone had expected. News of humanity's musical warfare spread throughout the galaxy, reaching species that had been living in enforced silence under Vorthak rule for centuries. What started as human defiance was becoming a galactic awakening. On the world of Kelanos Prime, where the Kalani people had been reduced to sign language for over 300 years, an elderly musician named Thysol heard the human broadcasts through an old communication device hidden in her basement. She had been a composer before the Great Silencing, creating beautiful melodies that had once filled the crystal cities of her world. Thysol was now 90 years old and had not spoken aloud since she was young, but something in the human music stirred memories she thought were lost forever. Late at night, when the Vorthak monitoring stations were less active, she began to hum quietly to herself. Just a simple melody at first, barely more than a whisper, but it felt like coming back to life after decades of being dead inside. Other Kalani heard her humming and were amazed. They had forgotten that their people once had voices, once made music that could move hearts and inspire dreams. Word spread through secret messages and hidden gatherings that someone was making sound again. Within days, dozens of Kalani were meeting in hidden places throughout their cities, rediscovering their voices through the human songs that continued to broadcast across space. They practiced quietly at first, afraid of Vorthak punishment, but gradually growing bolder as they remembered the joy of musical expression. The same awakening was happening on other worlds throughout the sector. On Zephyr, the Wind People remembered that their ancestors had once sung with the great storms that swept across their planet. The Zephyrians had natural voices that could harmonize with atmospheric conditions, creating music that was literally part of their world's weather patterns. Elder Wind Caller Erthon, who had not used his storm voice in 2 centuries, climbed to the highest peak on his continent and began to sing with the next major weather system. His voice, rusty from disuse but still powerful, joined with the howling winds to create a song that could be heard across half the planet. On Christhia, the silicon-based Christhians discovered that human music created beautiful resonance patterns in their crystal cities. These beings communicated through vibrations in their crystalline bodies, but they had been forced to limit their resonances to frequencies so low that they barely registered as communication at all. When the Christian, named Quartzesong, heard Emma Watson's violin performance, something in the simple melody resonated through her entire crystal matrix. She began to experiment with higher frequencies, creating harmonics that made the crystal buildings of her city ring like enormous musical instruments. Dr. Helen Carter, now serving as humanity's cultural ambassador, found herself at the center of an unprecedented galactic movement. Representatives from the awakening species began sending secret messages to human space, asking for help in rediscovering their lost voices. "It's incredible," Dr. Carter reported to Admiral Hamilton during their daily briefing. "We're receiving communications from species we didn't even know existed. They've been silent for so long that we never detected their presence, but now they're reaching out because they hear us singing." The hidden communication network grew daily. Species that had been silenced decades or centuries ago were teaching each other the songs and sounds they remembered from before the Vorthak conquered them. Children who had never heard their parents' voices were learning to speak for the first time. But the Vorthak Empire was not prepared to watch their carefully maintained order collapse. Grand Silence. Keeper Vorthamun, the ultimate authority of their civilization, had ruled for over 800 years by maintaining perfect quiet throughout his domain. The idea that multiple species were now making noise simultaneously was more than he could tolerate. "The corruption spreads faster than we anticipated," Vorthamun announced to his war council, his own communication barely registering as sound. "The noisemakers have infected other species with their chaos. We must act immediately before the disorder becomes permanent." The Vorthak response was swift and terrifying. They assembled the largest military fleet in their history, over 1,000 ships equipped with harmonic weapons designed specifically to damage the biological structures that other species used for sound production. Their plan was simple but horrifying: permanently silence every noisy species in the sector by destroying their ability to create sound. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral and leading humanity's expanding fleet, received intelligence about the Vorthak buildup from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Commander Ben Foster, still operating exploration vessels on the Galactic Rim, had encountered a group of Vorthak dissidents, younger members of their species who had begun to question the wisdom of enforced silence. The leader of these dissidents was a communication specialist named Zilthara. Unlike the older Vorthak, who had lived their entire lives believing that silence was the only path to peace, Zilthara belonged to a generation that had grown up hearing faint traces of human broadcasts. She and others like her had secretly listened to human music and found it fascinating rather than threatening. Not all Vorthak support the Grand Silence Keeper's policies, Zilthera transmitted to the human fleet through carefully encrypted channels. Some of us have listened to your music and found it beautiful. We want to help prevent the final quieting, but we must be careful. Discovery would mean death for us. The intelligence that Zilthara provided was invaluable. She revealed the locations of Vorthak weapons depots, the timing of their planned attack, and most importantly, the fact that the harmonic weapons they planned to use had never been tested against multiple species creating sound simultaneously. Admiral Morrison realized that humanity was no longer fighting alone. Across the galaxy, dozens of species were rediscovering their voices and preparing to resist Vorthak domination. The Kalani were teaching each other ancient songs. The Zephyrians were learning to sing with their storms again. The Christhians were making their cities ring with crystal music. "Dr. Carter," Morrison said during an emergency planning session, "you've spent your career studying human culture and communication. Now I need you to help coordinate the cultural resistance of an entire galaxy. Can you do that?" Dr. Carter looked at the communications data streaming in from dozens of worlds, where previously silent species were learning to make music again. "Admiral, what we're seeing here isn't just military resistance, it's a cultural revolution. These species aren't just fighting the Vorthak, they're reclaiming their identities." The stage was set for the final confrontation between the forces of silence and the growing chorus of galactic voices. The Vorthak were approaching with their largest fleet ever assembled, intent on silencing every species that dared to make noise. But they would face not just humanity, but a coalition of rediscovered voices that had been waiting centuries for the chance to sing again. The final battle took place in the neutral zone near the Proxima Nebula, where space itself shimmered with cosmic dust and energy that created natural light displays across the darkness. Admiral Jake Morrison led a combined fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Human ships flew alongside vessels from 17 different species, all united by their refusal to be silenced. The Kalani had sent their crystal ships that rang like musical instruments as they moved through space. The Zephyrians brought atmospheric vessels that could recreate the storm songs of their homeworld, even in the vacuum of space. The Christhians contributed ships made entirely of resonating crystal that could amplify sound across incredible distances. But this wasn't going to be a traditional space battle with weapons and explosions. Dr. Helen Carter had convinced the Allied leaders to try something that had never been attempted in galactic history. Instead of fighting the Vorthak with violence, they would show them the true power of coordinated sound and music. As the massive Vorthak fleet approached, with over 1,000 ships equipped with harmonic weapons designed to permanently damage the sound-producing organs of every noisy species, the Allied forces began their own preparation. Every ship in the combined fleet started broadcasting simultaneously, but this time it wasn't random noise or individual songs. Emma Watson, now 12 years old and aboard the flagship USS Harmony, had been working with musicians and sound engineers from every Allied species to create something unprecedented. They called it the Galactic Symphony, and it would be the largest coordinated musical performance in known history. The young girl who had started the revolution with her simple violin performance now stood on the bridge of humanity's most advanced ship, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species who had learned to make music again because of her courage. "Everyone ready?" Emma asked, her violin raised and ready to play. Around her, human musicians prepared their instruments while alien delegates activated their own unique sound-producing methods. Admiral Morrison watched the approaching Vorthak fleet on his tactical displays and gave Emma the signal to begin. The first notes of her violin rang out across space, amplified by the ship's communication arrays and broadcast to every vessel in the Allied fleet. But this time, Emma wasn't playing alone. The Kalani contributed their crystalline harmonies that had once filled their cities with beauty. The Zephyrians added their storm voices that could harmonize with natural atmospheric phenomena. The Christians provided deep, resonating bass notes that came from the fundamental vibration frequencies of their crystal bodies. Even some Vorthak dissidents, led by Zilthara aboard hidden ships within their own fleet, began contributing their subtle harmonic frequencies to the growing symphony. These younger Vorthak had been listening to the galactic music movement in secret and had learned to appreciate the beauty in coordinated sound. Grand Silence Keeper Vortha Moon, aboard his massive command vessel at the center of the Vorthak fleet, initially tried to resist the growing musical harmony that surrounded his forces. His ships had been equipped with the most advanced sound-dampening technology in Vorthak history, designed to maintain perfect silence even in the middle of battle. But as the galactic symphony grew stronger, with hundreds of ships and thousands of voices joining in perfect coordination, something unexpected began to happen. The harmonic resonance created by so many different species working together was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. Their weapon systems, calibrated to disrupt individual species' sound production, couldn't cope with the complex harmonies created by multiple alien physiologies working in concert. The harmonic weapons began to malfunction as they tried to target frequencies that were constantly shifting and evolving. More importantly, younger Vorthak crew members throughout the fleet began to respond to the music despite their conditioning. Their natural communication frequencies, suppressed for centuries in favor of absolute silence, started to synchronize with the galactic harmony. Admiral Morrison opened a direct communication channel to Vortha Moon himself, his words carried by the cosmic symphony that now filled the space between the two fleets. Grand Silence Keeper, we're not asking you to abandon your quiet ways. We're asking you to let others choose their own methods of expression. For a moment, that seemed to last forever. Space held its breath while Vortha Moon considered the human admiral's words. The Grand Silence Keeper had ruled through fear and enforced conformity for 8 centuries, believing that his way was the only path to galactic peace. But as he listened to the harmonious coordination of dozens of species working together, creating something beautiful instead of chaotic, he began to understand what he had been missing. The music wasn't random noise or destructive chaos. It was organized, purposeful, and collaborative. Slowly, carefully, Vortha Moon began to respond. Not with the cold, mechanical voice he used for official communications, but with his natural harmonic frequency. His voice, unused for centuries, was beautiful and melodic in its own unique way. Perhaps, he transmitted, his words rippling through the harmonic field that connected both fleets. There is room in the galaxy for many different kinds of voices. The transformation that followed was gradual but profound. The Vorthak fleet powered down their harmonic weapons and began to withdraw, but not in defeat. Younger Vorthak crew members were already experimenting with adding their own natural harmonies to the Galactic Symphony. Over the following months, the Galactic Silence Council was formally dissolved and replaced by the Harmony Accords, an agreement that guaranteed every species the right to communicate in their own natural way. Some species, like the Vorthak, preferred quiet harmonics and subtle frequencies. Others, like humans, expressed themselves through loud music and joyful noise. The galaxy became a richer, more diverse place. Vorthak composers began creating pieces that incorporated human instruments. Human musicians learned to appreciate the subtle beauty of crystalline harmonies and storm songs. Children from different species played together, learning each other's musical traditions. Emma Watson, now recognized as the child whose violin had sparked a galactic revolution, continued to play her music as she grew up, but she was no longer playing alone. Students from dozens of worlds came to learn from the girl who had shown them that even the simplest melody could change the universe. Admiral Morrison, standing on the bridge of his ship as the combined fleets began to disperse, watched vessels from dozens of species flying together through space. Their various forms of communication created a beautiful, complex harmony that echoed through the stars. Commander Lisa Parker joined him at the viewport, listening to the ongoing galactic symphony that had become a permanent feature of this region of space.
Think it will last, sir? This harmony between so many different species?
Morrison smiled as he watched a Vorthax ship flying in formation with human vessels, their crews learning to coordinate through a combination of quiet harmonics and louder human communication. Lisa, humanity has spent its entire existence learning to make beautiful sounds in a universe that seemed silent. I think we can handle sharing that gift with others. In the years that followed, the story of the Galactic Symphony became legend throughout known space. New species that were discovered were welcomed not with demands for silence or conformity, but with invitations to add their own voices to the growing chorus of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, whenever a child picks up an instrument for the first time, or a previously silent species discovers its voice, or someone sings alone in the darkness between stars, the echo of humanity's great roar still resonates. It serves as a reminder that some things, like the right to express oneself, the joy of music, and the courage to resist those who would silence you, are always worth making noise about. The aliens had wanted silence, but humanity taught the galaxy to sing.